I will do a quick introduction of the panel members, starting from Aprajita. Aprajita is a mom, inventor, mentor. She's an international speaker with engineering background, specializing in bioinformatics, and she has more than 10 years of experience in software testing. She has worked on a wide range of products like software links, integrated solutions, data analysis pipelines, industries like agriculture, transport, genomics, forensic, oncology. How do you do so much? Okay, and we are very privileged to have you here, Aparajita, talking to us today. We have James. If you don't know James, you should do yourself a favor and please check out why you don't know him yet. And same goes about Michael Bolton and Anna. Thank you so much for joining us today, people. And I would like to start with the very first question I have for you. On the topic, my first question is, as a tester, how is your personal association with the word failure? Like, I mean, I'm just curious to know what kind of feelings and reactions it generates in you when you think of failure as a tester, and if you have any stories to share. Michael, why don't you start first?
Well, it's a pretty open-ended question, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
failure is a relationship. That's one of the first things. And it seems to me that I'd noticed somebody citing Ajay, citing my relative rule, which was something I kind of adapted from Jerry Weinberg's notion that quality is value to some person. Well, there's a more general pattern than that, and that is that failure is any abstract X is X to some person. So failure is failure to some person. And I think, conversation with James before the talk, one of the things we're going to touch on is, well, what are we talking about here? what notion of failure? Whose perception of failure? Because that's very different from some person's perception of failure might be an utter success. I was speaking to a tester the other day who spoke of not getting a job. She was shortlisted for a job. She was on the list of 4 people to get a job, and she didn't get it. And she considers that a failure. Well, hang on, you got onto the short list. People, the person who's doing the hiring clearly values your skills and is worthy of, or believes you're worthy of this. So, yes, it's a failure to get the job, but is it a failure of your personhood? And she seemed to be suggesting that she thought so. And I didn't think that was right at all. In fact, I think she failed to analyze the situation in at least a multiplicity of ways. So I'm a little nervous about the concept of failure being looked at as an absolute of any kind. I don't know if that helps to answer your question.
More or less, yes. Yeah, I mean, I usually, when I look at failure as a tester, it actually doesn't make me sad. I feel joy. Okay, I found something. This is what I'm getting paid for. And I'm not just talking about the bugs, but finding and exposing the failures and the risk associated of those of any kind. And when I find that it
well, that's somebody else's failure. That's not your own failure, though.
Of course, not mine. Yeah, but this is
a whole different thing. If it's your own failure, we laugh at other people's failures.
I had those moments when I was laughing for expressing my joy for finding bugs, and the developer was looking at me like, "What a sadist guy he is." But well, I get paid for being a sadist in software. Never mind. James, what do you think about the question?
My first thought is that I take failure very personally. My own failures very, very personally, and like a lot of you out there, one of the ways I cope with that is I try to be the first person to understand that I have failed. I hate it when somebody else points it out before I've realized it. So that means that I try to be hyper self-critical. But I often encounter students, for instance, who are too self-critical. they're so worried about somebody else finding out that they're and pointing at their failure before they've realized that something is wrong, that they rush to fail. they they don't give themselves a chance to succeed because they don't want to take the risk of being a fool and not realizing it. So you can overdo the self-critical stuff, but I do think for the kind of craftsmanship that I aspire to, I need to be a harsh critic of myself. And it's how I can emotionally deal with it when someone else says to me, "Oh, you hurt my feelings," for instance. I get that a lot. I hurt a lot of people's feelings, usually by accident. And but I'm emotionally girded for that because I already think about that a lot. I think about the trade-offs that I have to make, and I want to be strong, and I want to fight injustice or fight ignorance or stand up for what's right. But at the same time, I don't want to stomp all over people who might be innocent. And so I'm constantly struggling with how bold and argumentative I should be. But it's because I have this self-critical thing operating in me that I'm able to emotionally recover pretty quickly when somebody says that I have terribly offended them. And I am better now than I used to be at recovering from that. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Aprajita, what is your take on that?
I'll put failure. If as a tester, the domain that I work in, it's absolutely required. The technology is growing so fast that if you don't fail soon enough, you're not going to learn, right? And the technology cannot grow further in the space of genomics. So I see failure as a tester a very positive thing, not just in software, but just even in process and the overall products that exist. In personal life, for me, failures have been more futuristic, right? So people have come up to me multiple times in life and said, "Hey, don't do that. You're going to fail because XYZ." And generally, I take that as a challenge. So in personal life, I've heard enough of that. I would rather try than not try. And it's not that, someone has warned me, I do it. It's not that I always succeed. I do fail sometimes, but it's okay. It's okay, you learn. You also learn to categorize and bin these thoughts. What are the perspectives that you're hearing from other people in your life that may or may not be valid for your personality type and may or may not be valid for you as a person. So as a tester, I think it's very much needed, at least in the space that I work in. If I don't fail soon enough, it's going to be outdated. And then second, for personal life, I take that as a challenge more than anything else. It's a space to learn from, but people don't talk about it. Maybe that they come and give me suggestions more than describing why they think I might fail, right? It's more of a, you can't do this or you can't do that. It's more of a statement. So.
I have a follow-up question for you, Aprajita. I guess you're still working in healthcare and a very sensitive area of cancer research, and so I'm curious to know if failures, if they do not scare you, be it your failure or your team's failure, considering the impact it might have on the people out there that you're trying to help.
Yeah, that's a great question. So do realize cancer and other health conditions in humans, I'm just speaking of humans, have existed for decades. And where are we today? We're still nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if, if a product gives the wrong outcome for a patient, if that is what you consider failure, yes, it is a big deal for that family. It is a big deal for that patient. We take it very seriously. But it teaches us something very critical. It teaches us things that we can go back, trace back, and figure out how we can do it better for the rest of the patients that exist, right? And I've said this enough, but Mother Nature moves very fast. We cannot catch up with it. And you guys are probably seeing this year with COVID, right? Last year, everyone has lived it. You guys see it. I've seen this for the last 15 years of my life. So it is, you are going to run into something. You're going to run into a patient. You're going to run into a screen. You're going to run into something that doesn't fit your model. That is going to lead to a failure. That's what you call it. But for me, it's actually a finding. It's like finding something that, oh my God, I found this data. I found this patient. I found this virus. I know about it, now I can do something about it. If I didn't know, if I'm oblivious to the fact it exists, I cannot do anything. I cannot help anybody else. So I take it seriously, but it's very critical to go down that path if you want to evolve faster.
Okay, there's some little lag on my. I guess you can hear me again. Anna, I would like to hear from you.
And can you unmute? Okay, cool. So you unmuted me. Can you repeat the question?
The question is, how do you associate yourself with the word failure, particularly as a tester?
I got it. Well, I have been mostly in the role of a manager or lead. So I had to, number one, deal with failures in my team. Number two, deal with presenting failures or whatever it is, being accused of failures from the management and associated teams who are we delivering for our customers and our stakeholders. And to me, the failure is mainly the way I associate it with failure is the technology. So to me, my association is the technology keeps on failing me. And probably right now as well, I'm not sure how well you hear me because I'm watching this little thing that shows how clear my voice is, and it doesn't look like it's always clear. So we are in like 21st century, and we are in like second year of being online, only virtual, and the technology keeps on failing us. So that's something that I keep on associating with. This is what bugs me, and probably everything else goes around it. We are, as testers, we are surrounded by somebody's failure. Maybe it's technology, maybe it's somebody's process, maybe it's somebody's thinking, maybe it's somebody's skills. We have to present this, we have to discover this failure. We keep on discovering this failure, and maybe it becomes like a professional thing. Like a professional trait that you see failures all over you in your life, everywhere, in the relationships, and because we are bug catchers, and we keep on, like, our mindset is like set up towards like looking for failures, fighting failures. And I remember very first time I met Mike, and I took RST with Mike. And he keeps on talking about like, oh, I was in a plane, and I started testing like something like the system around me. And to me, like, this is the tester's mindset: is we look for failure, we're interested in finding them, we are excited by them. But as a manager, it's a different way of dealing with it. As a manager, my attitude is adaptability. So there is so many failures, and sometimes you're being blamed for those failures, and it's common to blame testers for somebody else's failures, like, why didn't you catch this bug, why is it in production, something stupid like that. And as a manager, I had to deal with it frequently. And I think that I'm not looking at my team as a failure. I'm not looking at testers as a failure at all. I don't even accept this as something that I deal with. I adapt. So to me, the testing is a process. I I don't assume that process is a failure. If it's a failure, you change it. You change it frequently. You adapt, and that's the attitude I try to instill in my testers. Is that, well, something else working, adapt to different process, to different something, and this is, to me, this is, yeah, to me, this is something that I think should be the attitude of the testers as well. So I don't ever want
Anna,
to see. Yeah.
you have an experience of working a long time at, I remember, LiquidNet, where you struggled quite a lot because you were surrounded, and I worked with you then. You were surrounded by managers who wouldn't listen to you. It was very frustrating to me as someone working with you and trying to help you. And year after year, I saw you just keep trying. You kept trying, but ultimately, there's nothing you can do if you're surrounded by people who just decide we're not gonna listen, right? Well, isn't that a kind of failure of a sort?
Maybe, but it's nothing to do with my with the testers' ability to do their work. It's a communication failure, and sometimes it's a political failure. But
wait, nothing though.
I think it's more politics, right? And it's diplomacy, right? And this is what you are teaching me: is how to be diplomatic about talking to managers. Sometimes I can see that I fail to persuade, certain people at certain things, but that's probably where I would stop in associating with failures.
I saw you in that situation. I don't think any of that was your failure. I think you were dealing with overgrown children who wouldn't take responsibility for themselves. They wouldn't tell you to your face what they were telling each other, right? So I just think a lot of us are stuck in situations where there's nothing we can do. We're trying to test. We're trying to do the job we were given, and the developers are trying to undermine us. And I mean, sometimes you just have to have what Jerry Weinberg called an attitude of acceptance, where you realize maybe there's just nothing I can do, but I'm still going to strive and
do my job. Yeah,
and do my job. And you did that year after year. I have no patience for that. I can't do that. But I saw you do it, and I really admire that.
Thank you. And it's very interesting because we had very similar conversation with Aprajita. Pretty much the same conversation that I told her the same way. What you're telling me now, I told it to Aprajita. We just have to do your job. Yes. Just do your best.
Thank you for that, Anna. Thank you. It was a big deal. I was ready to leave my job if I didn't see a turnaround, because at that point it was what Lalit was saying. I felt I found something that they didn't act on it. It's gonna cause patient harm. And
wow.
Fingers crossed. And I'm so happy that the administration saw it, they acknowledged it, and they said, pause. Let's fix this right now. We cannot get out with this. So that gave me so much encouragement. But between myself and like the top people, there was so much bureaucracy that it took a while to build that patience and get there. So thank you for that 15-minute or 30-minute conversation. It was life-changing.
Excellent, and I thank you all for sharing these stories. The reason I asked this question was mostly because I often experience testers to be very afraid of failures. They are constantly subjected to this blame game, being held responsible for failures and all. And through your stories, I just wanted them and everybody who is watching it to know that even great people like you all that are there on the panel, they have had their own moments of facing and handling failures, and it's pretty cool to deal with it and learn from it and go ahead and see how interesting stories are coming up now. Well, Anna, that you mentioned about the failure of the technology and the people and the politics around things, I have a next question, and I would like you to answer that first. Looking at industry's obsession with automation, its inclination towards developer testing, or say efforts to employ artificial intelligence, machine learning, to make testing more productive, do you think this is happening because testers failed at something?
Yeah, what's the question?
So the question is, do you think it is because of the testers failing at something that is making industry or the decision makers move towards more automation, employ artificial intelligence, machine learning, and this and that, and go away from thinking, testing, craftsmanship? Who
You
is to
know,
blame here?
uh, I've seen in the industry the search for silver bullet, and it's ongoing. Managers keep on seeking silver bullet on how there is some technology that solves all our problems, and it keeps on not happening and not happening and not happening. Um, when I think some people are like, they see the world intelligence and they think that this thing is smart, but it's not. You know, the irony of artificial intelligence is that you have to test it. So maybe it's a self-learning algorithm, but you have to really test it well in order to make this thing do what you need to be doing. So you really cannot escape uh, having a tester's mindset and the critical thinking and all of that. And you need all these things even more with artificial intelligence than you might have with some plain application that anybody can test. I'm talking about like fantastic things, but probably what I'm saying that artificial intelligence, it's not smart. You have to train it. It's like a little puppy. You have to train it. You have to test uh, its ability. You have to know that it's doing the right thing. You have to tell it not to do that other things. But you really need to see the behavior of that thing. Same thing that you're a trainer, you are a tester, and you have to be the same with any artificial intelligence tools. So
Thank you.
I'm really not seeing how we can somehow magically escape the tester's involvement with all of that. I think we need even more critical thinking and skill testing to deal with this emerging technology from now on. I think it's not going away. This is the thing. It's not going away. It's so hypey. It's very hypey. And so we have to armor ourselves and fight for this even more because we are needed there. We are needed on the field.
Thank you so much, Anna. Michael, I will go right next to you for this question. I'm sure you have a lot to talk about this topic. What do you think about this silver bullet that Anna talked about? Is it because managers are seeking this silver bullet of technology because testers failed them somehow?
Sorry, I have to unmute. Not a habit. I don't know how to answer the question really. I mean, if you're you were looking at, it sounded to me like you were looking for blame allocation. Is it a human? Whose fault is it that humans do believe in magic? Well,
It's tester's fault.
Is it? Well,
Yes, it is our fault. It's a
well,
simple question with a simple answer. It's our fault.
It is true that it is our fault to some degree. It is also the fault of marketers, we could say. It's also the fault of the people who labeled it artificial intelligence in the first place. But if you want to speak to,
well, are we talking about artificial intelligence now? Is that
well?
Is that
that worries me a little bit too. How do we have we as testers failed to articulate what skilled craftsmanship means.
Yes.
I think
Almost
we have.
no tester can articulate what skilled craftsmanship means.
I think
So
that's
of course nobody understands.
right. I think that's a failure. But whenever I think about that, I'm thinking of, well, what's our part in it? But not. I can't say that we are to blame for it. And you use that.
I say we're to blame for it. I can say that. So
okay.
I don't know why you can't. That's weird to me that you say we're not to blame for it.
Well, because to blame, to me, James, indicates sole responsibility. And I don't think we are solely responsible. I think
we're substantially responsible. We don't have to nitpick about sole responsibility. But we are substantially responsible for doing this to ourselves when we have an industry of people who don't articulate the reason for their own existence and don't study their own craft and just go with the flow. Then of course people are going to walk all over us. It's just, of course, if lawyers were like this, then lawyers would get walked over. If doctors were like this, then doctors would get walked over. It's so you could say it's very understandable because testers are generally very young and they get out of testing after a few years and go do other things. So not very many people stay in testing. Like, we're the crazy ones, right, Anna? We stayed in testing. Why don't we get some sense and start our own company? Well, actually, you have started your own company. I started my own company. Michael started his own company, but we're still in the testing business.
But none of you are selling robots, so we are still good.
No, we're not selling robots. But I do think that we don't have to look very far to blame anyone else. We can say, we don't have to just say there's no one to blame. We can find lots of responsibility in us as a collective, that if you just go with folk knowledge on testing and these sloppy YouTube videos that you can find all over the place, which just show all kinds of myths about testing and dopey things about equivalence class partitioning that don't pass the smell test and are completely unscientific and are mathematically illiterate. Well, of course, no one's going to take us seriously because there are actual smart people out there who can tell that we're BSing about boundary value analysis and that sort of thing. So, we are to blame.
So so the failure, it seems to me, is in our capacity to tell that story. There's also a failure, though, I think, of people to listen to that story, because people who want to purchase AI tools or methodologies or whatever the silver bullet of the month is, they believe in magic, and they haven't been disabused of that. I think that's it's up to them to some degree. James,
you're right.
I'm absolutely with you. You're
right. I only find self-blame to be the interesting kind of blame because I can only do something about self-blame. I can't do anything about the other people. So that's why I don't dwell upon non-testers and what non-testers are doing, to us. I don't like feeling like a victim, so I don't like talking about this, but I guess you're right. Yeah, I mean, of course, management bears responsibility. Absolutely.
Well, here's a key issue with that, though, and this is where I think you are right. I don't think we're talking to managers articulately. There's that failure, but I don't think managers are seeking out good advice either. And so there's a kind of meta problem. So one of the things we fail to do is to create better clients for that. And I think part of that is we might be talking to each other more than we could be talking to managers.
Why are we talking just about AI ML? This has existed since QTP. I don't know. I'm just saying, like 10 years ago, I remember, I keep saying the same thing, but this was such an old tool. We've evolved to so many other automation tools. AI ML is just one type of them, right? Automation, even automation, we have the same conversation. You automate something with Selenium, it's going to catch 100% of the bugs, right? That's the thought process. Once you automate something, once a functional tester tells you how to automate something or to automate this test case, we don't need this person. That's the thought process. So that hasn't changed.
I wouldn't
They're just
characterize that as a thought process.
right.
I think AI stands for automated irresponsibility. And if it's a puppy dog, it's a 75-ton puppy dog that we have to deal with.
Right. And so I think we're just looking at different wizards. The game is still on, right? You just went from different automation tools to like a new one now. It doesn't change the thought process. They're on the same thought process, right?
True.
That hasn't changed.
Sure. I mean, it's AI or ML wasn't really my matter of concern. It was more about why it is consistently happening, why this moron, so to say, is coming back in different forms again and again, and who is the reason for this is happening. And I think James kind of answered that.
Here's a simple way to say it. If we allow people to believe that testing is a matter of typing on keys, that's what we do. We're key typers. We're button clickers. Then they're going to very reasonably say, can't we have a machine click on the buttons? And why do we need you to click on the buttons? We need to be conveying that we are a skilled craft. Programmers, everyone knows that programmers do skilled things. So that's why no one says, we want to do automated programming. Are you a manual programmer or an automated programmer? No one ever asks that question because people think you do programming with your mind. But testers allow themselves to be seen as button pushers, and this is
James, how would you suggest to change that? What would be your suggestion that testers do from their side to change this all?
Well, all we can do from our side is to become increasingly articulate. First of all, we've got to police our own selves. We've got to be good at what we do. Okay. Now, I don't know much about Aprajita, but everything I have heard you say indicates that you are have a craftsmanship mentality and you take responsibility for your own skills. I have personal knowledge of Anna. She runs something she calls the Test Masters Academy, which kind of tells you her attitude about craftsmanship. So she runs a very craftsmanship-oriented idea. Michael and I are very much into craftsmanship. So we try to work on our own craftsmanship. And we bring students into this, and we learn from our students as well. Anyone who's been my student knows I learn from you. I'll draw you in to my sphere. And if you work with me, it's not just going to be hearing a lot of lecture. We're going to be working together. We're going to be testing together. And then you'll see me learn stuff and talk about that. And then I'll write blogs about it, and I'll create new class material about it because I'm learning. And that's what I can do. I can police myself. Then I can practice explaining testing. So, of course, my job is to explain testing. So it's easy for me to say that that's what you should do because that's the only thing that I do. I'm constantly explaining testing. It's better. It's more interesting if someone who mostly does testing for a living instead of training testers, as I do, practices talking about testing. That's much more impressive than me who does it full time. So it's more an issue for you, Aprajita, I would think. If you, with the work that you do, because you don't primarily teach testers, right? Aprajita, you are running projects and stuff. Isn't that true?
I actually have to teach testers because it is very generally the people who come into my space, they are, people from biology background.
Perfect. Then you are actually an example of the role model we're talking about because you're not a full-time trainer. You're a manager who also realizes that you need to be articulate and you need to explain and you need to explain over and over again and you need to have training skills, even though training is not your full-time thing. That's an example of a role model. You are the model that we need more of in the industry, because it's not easy for you to say, gee, I want to just get really good at training and really good at explanation and all, because you've got other things to do. You've got to actually manage projects and ship things. So that's more impressive coming from you.
I appreciate that. And it's actually very hard to get senior management to understand why it's so important to teach, the craft of testing. I've actually even heard, like when I interview people, I've told people that I'm not going to hire this person. They don't have that concept. They don't have that tester's heart. They don't get it. They're like, it's testing. Anybody can do it. I'm like, if anybody can do it, then, why do you have me here?
Right.
No, everybody cannot do it. Like but it is very difficult to explain. And I haven't seen it change at least in the industry that I work in. I haven't seen it change. It's the same.
I so wish this conversation could be some prime time broadcasting. A lot of people need to hear this out. With that, I will ask.
One thing I would like to add to this is that it's hard, socially hard, and Aprajita really pointed this out. It's socially hard to be a tester because most people who are involved in software development are builders, makers, people who are focused on envisioning success. And it's hard socially for us to be good critics anticipating failure. That's part of the tester's gig, is to anticipate and to identify places where the product doesn't fit its context, not just where it doesn't work mechanically, but where it doesn't solve the problem for the human being. I think our failure as a craft to distinguish between those two kinds of testing, those two elements of testing, is something that we should look at.
Excellent. My next question is, we are just seeing the stories of success and celebration and achievements with automation these days. I would like to know from you, where has automation failed you as a tester?
When has it not failed me?
That is a good one. Do you have any interesting?
I've not had any product where automation has not failed me, and that's okay, because there are places that you don't want to automate. There are things that you don't want to automate. It doesn't even make sense to do it. So if you go ahead and automate it and you're expecting return out of it, it's not going to work. I've actually seen people come back and say, all of my tests are green. And I'm like, great, but it doesn't tell you anything.
I want to know, though, look, to say how has automation failed us is to explain success one way and then to explain failure in a completely different way. Automation helps us. Automation fails us, but it's not the automation that's doing that, because the automation is just a thing. It's just a tool. You could say my hammer failed me. Why? Because I broke the window. Well, no, my hammer failed me. Why? Because I hit my thumb. The trouble is you are not developing the skills to use the hammer properly. So this automation failure thing to me is bogus. We are investing in automation, its capacity for success or failure, but automation doesn't succeed or fail. We do. And the automation, it's like that Pradeep. A tester doesn't find a bug, or the test doesn't find a bug. The tester finds the bug, and the test has a role in finding the bug. Similarly, the automation doesn't find the problem, or the automation doesn't fail to find the problem. The automation just does what that tester asks it to do, and the tester interprets that. The automation has a role, but it's not the thing.
Well, the automation fails to fulfill our dreams. And we have dreams for it. We hope that it will give us wings and make us fly, and then it doesn't, and we feel disappointed.
And
we have wrong expectations, right? I think we have wrong expectations. We try and automate things. I feel we try and automate things that we shouldn't be automating.
Like that.
See, a bot.
We can't automate that.
Not automate.
A learning machine right there.
My
Do
son's
you hear me,
27. He
Lily?
still does that.
Yes, Anna, yes, we hear you. You can continue.
So I'm gonna speak as a manager and the customer of automation, and this is always how I presented myself. This is my role. I am the client of automation. As a client, automation fails me if it's not there when I need it, because it's a tool. For example, you go into the airport and you take in a car and your car breaks. Whose failure is that? I don't think it's your failure. It's the tool failure at this point. And to me, I only see that automation could fail me when it's not there when I need it. So no other failures I consider failures, because yes, I accept the responsibility for the tool to work and be configured in the way I want it, right? So if I'm for example in the US, then my wheel should be on a certain place. If I'm in UK, my wheel should be in another place, right? But I am a customer of that. I probably will select the tool that fits my needs most, but I need this tool to be there when I need it, and that's the only failure that I could think of. For example, if you have a great automation suite of tests and you release it and it's for some reason it's not working because whatever, then I consider it a failure, because this is the time when I need the information from it. It's not giving me this information at the time I need. I consider it a tool failure for whatever reason it is. Sometimes it's somebody who's responsible not being too responsible for giving me results I need, but let's be honest about that. It's a tool that I am a client of, and I use it to get me the information I need at the time I need it. So that.
So sometimes a failure of automation is a failure with respect to the misrepresentation of automation by marketers. Marketers say it'll do this and that, and then managers buy it. They go, well, the demos, the guy demonstrated it, and it got in, it logged in all by itself in this test application, and it tested this application called My Test App perfectly in the demo. So of course it will automatically test our 911 dispatching system, won't it? They promised it would, and then the tool doesn't live up to that promise. But the testers are stuck with it because their managers paid a whole lot of money for it. So it's like when your grandmother knits you a sweater and gives it to you for Christmas, and the sweater costs $300,000 per year. It's a site licensed sweater. You have to wear it. You have to wear it every day because it was so expensive. And,
I would like to.
People keep having that with automation. They're forced to use it.
Thanks, James. Okay, go ahead, Aprajita.
I was going to ask Anna. So Anna, have you experienced this? Like you get a tool, right, which fits what you need to do at the time. But how many times have we reevaluate if our needs have changed? And now if this tool is the right tool to use? Because to what James just said, we already bought the sweater. We're not going to go buy 3 other sweaters now because it's already too expensive. But then, you know, I need a wind cheater. I don't need a sweater. I haven't seen people reevaluate. They don't.
Here's another thing they don't evaluate. They don't evaluate the status of the tests that are supposedly running green. They don't look at the possibility that those things are misleading us in some kind of systematic way.
That is a very good point. That brings me to the next question. Since we have been talking about managers, leadership, making decisions, I would like to know from you, do you think engineering leadership has failed testing as a profession? I mean, I'm talking about those managers, VPs, directors who want to formalize testing and automate everything And as James, you rightly pointed out in your blog, this problem from 80s still exists. Do you think it has failed testing profession?
Yes.
And what do we do about it?
Well, we could fire all the managers and send them to re-education camps, I suppose. Let's see. Let me check to see if I have the power of doing that. No, apparently I can't do that. So I guess we just have to keep trying. We have to keep trying to learn how to talk to managers and speak in the languages that they understand. And it's tough. But I'll tell you one thing that would make it easier: if we had certain very big companies with prominent companies, like a massive, huge banks or something, and if leaders in those companies were to spearhead or embrace better ways of thinking about testing, then other companies would be influenced by that. And that happened to me and Michael some years ago when we worked at Barclays Bank. And that was a brief Shangri-La until the CTO of Barclays was replaced with another guy, and he brought in his friends, and they ended up getting rid of the champion that we had, who was so powerful in that organization, who was in charge of all the testing. That guy went away, and so our whole corporate sponsorship went away. All of the work that we'd done for 2 years with Barclays sort of went out the window. We were building a whole professional culture there, and they went to the four winds. But here's something interesting. I was then hired by another bank in the Middle East later on. And the reason I was hired there is because some refugees from Barclays Bank went over to this other bank, and then they wanted to do professional testing culture there and testing craftsmanship. So it got spread around a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's a big deal if a big company decides that it's going to be a champion of better management. But here's a way to think about it. Testing craftsmanship is like a rare orchid that has to be grown under very careful conditions. And if you take away the hothouse and you take away the conditions that make people want to develop testing craftsmanship, you can destroy that culture almost overnight. And I've seen that happen at the first test lab that I ever worked at, ST Labs. We built this really high morale culture of testing craftsmanship. And then management got into some trouble financially and changed the way they were relating to the testers and made it a hell to work there. And all these wonderful people started leaving in droves, and our culture collapsed. It's just so fragile. The culture of craftsmanship and intellectual camaraderie, very easy to destroy and very hard to rebuild.
No matter how much it looks like a technology problem, it's always a people problem. Lalit, I'd like to cut in for just a sec because I noticed the time is waning. Yeah. There are a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and I'll guarantee that we won't be able to answer them here, but I would also like to transfer those questions to the Slack forum and make sure we get them answered, because some of them are pretty interesting and worthy of a further discussion.
For sure. I would like to ask for another question, just more or less your opinion on that. A couple of days or maybe a week before, I saw a tool based on artificial intelligence and machine learning that is actually recommending to automate middle layer management. So in fact, the CEO positions. Do you think something like this would probably make them think differently about how they think about automating intellectual activity like testing?
It might work if you have a horrible CEO. I don't know. I don't know. I feel AI is all over the place, and we're thinking too much about it. I don't know why. It's not even close to what you guys think AI is. Like when I think of AI, I think of you guys. I think of us. I think of our heads. There's AI here. It's all based on human brain and science. So no, it's not even close. I don't know, but I know there's a lot of buzz and there's a lot of marketing. You just need to be cautious of it and not just fall for the trap.
I'm going to answer the question in a leap by saying, here's a failure. How is it that every time we try to talk about something else, we get turned back to AI again? A failure to police the boundaries of the conversation, where it's this massive distraction to me. But it is indicative of a certain kind of failure.
Question, Michael, that probably would like to answer. Do you think the idea of good enough software seems to be the justification given for getting away from this craftsmanship and more inclination to engineering aspect of testing? Do you see this as a failure of software industry, or it is more like the context-driven thing they are doing now?
What you just described, Lalit, is the antithesis of good enough software testing. Good enough software testing has to be good enough on two different, kind of on the same axes. It's got to be good enough to serve the fundamental mission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also got to be inexpensive enough and focused enough, and all those different dimensions of good enough. What's funny is good enough has become an idiom that means not good enough, but that's ridiculous. That's not what James meant when he created the first, one of the first anyway, notions of good enough software testing.
Won't people say, oh, you elitists, we make lots of money with the software quality that we have. We don't need it to be any better. So you guys are just caught in your own little perfectionist world. And we feel just fine driving our Ferraris after Google buys our companies. And then we don't even care if Google succeeds or fails with the software that they bought from us. I mean, we're faced with a world where bad software is okay. It's legal. It's tolerated. Look, we even have ransomware all over the place. We've got security flaws all throughout software, and still nobody's going to jail for making this terrible security flaw-ridden software. Microsoft's not paying any penalties. Google's not paying any penalties to speak of for producing this problem for us with their headlong pace of innovation. They're just transferring the cost of bad software to society, and we're letting them do it. We as a people are letting them do it. So there is a point of view that says if it's legal and it's okay to have bad software, then let's do it. Otherwise, it'll be someone else getting rich instead of us. And there's not a lot we can say against that, is there, Michael? Other than we don't like those people.
Well, what's the thing that I was saying recently? If we agree that human health, human safety, risk, loss of reputation, money, access to education, access to resources, if all that is not on the table, then I'm going to drop all my objections to shoddy software testing. But if stuff matters, then the quality of the software matters and the quality of the testing matters.
That's really my answer to all this. My answer is I can't save the world, and the world doesn't really want me to save it anyway. But there are just enough clients out there that I can make a living helping the people who want me to help them. So even though I'm not going to fix the world, I can focus on the subset of the industry that does care about doing good work.
And we can all do that.
And we can all do that.
To do that, I think. And to the degree that we haven't done that, that's a failure.
True. I have one last question from my side. If there is one thing you would like testers not to fail at, what would it be? Anna.
So one thing is the self-confidence. I just had a conversation before we started the session with James, and he said that he has somebody who is not confident in herself, and she thinks that she's a failure and she wants to leave the industry. And James said that he came across my talk. It's a 10-minute talk. You can find it on the web. I'm talking about the leadership, and I'm talking about how to accept yourself as a leader and train yourself to be a leader because you need it. As a leader, you are needed in the industry. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really essential. You cannot hide from the responsibility anymore. You have to accept the responsibility not just for yourself, but for enhancing the environment around you. And even if it's a peer leadership, and I was, as Jay mentioned before, I had a situation in my company where all the QA managers were fired. They were demoted. 2 testers, and it didn't stop me. I was demoted. It didn't stop me. I was a peer leader in my team, and then I started growing again. So it became a circle. So they I was a QA manager, QA director, and they demoted me. And so I went from here to here, and then they become a lead again, and became a manager again, and director again, and it's went full circle. Because if you're the leader, then it shows. People see you, people come to you, people take you as an expert. And I think all of us, we are responsible for becoming experts. And as soon as you're an expert, you will be a leader because you're an influencer. And all of us should do ourselves a favor and become influencers in where you are right now. And then grow.
Thanks. So, thank you, Anna. So self-confidence from your end. Michael, what would be one thing you would never want testers to fail at?
Noting that there's not only ever one thing.
Okay.
I mean, testers need to be articulate communicators. They need to be skilled technicians, at least to some degree, most of the time. They need to be skilled social agents. They need to be skilled general systems modelers. They need to be skilled critical thinkers. So the one thing, if there is one thing, it's to be a general on the one hand and to recognize that you can't be great at everything, but you can be good at many things. And working in a social context, working with other people is your way of shoring up those things that you might not be so strong on yourself. But aspire to something more than what we've got would be the thing that I would suggest that testers do.
Thank you. What about you, Aprajita?
I would say self-expectations. I think we fail when we set ourselves really high a bar of what we think we should be delivering, even though the environment may not allow for it. So sometimes it's just self-critiquing and saying, okay, did I set the right expectations for myself in this situation? And we feel frustrated because I think as a tester, I should be able to convince the developer and the product manager and X and Y and Z for all, the critical bugs that I found. That's my personal story that I was referencing earlier, right? So sometimes it's self evaluation and acceptance. You don't want to fail at that. Be realistic about what you can change, what you cannot change, what you can control, what you cannot control, and also be realistic about your fundamental beliefs. Like I shared this, that I would have left that job if they would have shipped that thing to production. I'm not saying everybody does that, but that was my fundamental principle. I'm going to hold to it. So don't let people walk over your fundamental belief system or whatever it is that you're wanting to do, right? So those are all mixed up, but self acceptance and self criteria of what you think you should be doing, don't fail at that.
Thank you. James, what would you say?
There's nothing I can say that will improve on what Anna said and on what Aprajita said and what Michael said. So my contribution will only be a tester should not fail to thank his fellow panelists for giving him a wonderful time. It was a great pleasure for me to be on this panel with you three. Thank you for indulging me in my excitability.
Thank you, James. Thank you, all of you. It has been a great interacting and listening from you.